Hi, I'm Kate. Welcome back to my channel. I talk about books here. Today I'm going to be covering and reviewing what I read in November. I read 6 things in November and I'm going to jump right into it with nonfiction. The first thing I read this month was I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. This is a seminal classic. It's constantly relevant. However, this April, it was banned by the Defense Secretary in all armed forces libraries, and that is absolutely shocking to me. And that's why I was motivated to read it. I'm trying to slowly go through that list of things that have been banned in armed forces libraries. And it's like banning that episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood where Mr. Rogers and Officer Clemens shared that kiddie pool. This was during segregation, and this was like an important touchstone in American media and an activism. And to ban this book, which is like a landmark and it's integral to the Black experience. It's about being Black and female and young in the American segregated South, and in fact it's one of the most banned books of all time, and school boards have been banning this thing for decades. However, it is also one of the most taught texts in American high schools as well, and I find that that's interesting, that it can be so divisive because it's so unflinching and because it's so truthful, that it's exactly why we should be reading it. This memoir covers racism, discrimination, and sexual abuse, and because of its covering of sexual abuse, that's why it's been banned so often, especially by school boards. I mean, we all know why the Defense Secretary doesn't want people to read this, but the main reason it's being banned in schools is because of her harrowing account of being abused at the age of 8. And my opinion, and the author's opinion as well, is that if you're old enough to have these things happen to you, you're old enough to read about them. And the edition I read, actually, Oprah Winfrey wrote the introduction to it, and that she had a very similar experience of abuse, and then when she read this book, she was finally seeing herself reflected for the first time in a text, and that it was so important to her for her self-worth and her understanding the world around her and her pursuing being a writer. And I think that's why books like these are important to read. I also think they're important because they contextualize despair, sorrow, and rage, and by extension they show survival and empowerment, and therefore these stories need to be preserved and remembered in order for this country to do any healing. It's like that song by Sinead O'Connor. There needs to be remembering, then grieving, then healing.
And if there ever is gonna be healing, there has to be remembering and then grieving, so that the then can be forgiving. There has to be knowledge and understanding.
As for the book itself, it was so tremendously well written. I couldn't put it down. She has such a talent with words, and she is a poet, and I feel that long pieces of prose like a memoir or a novel written by poets are always so articulate, and the way that they're able to observe the world and make commentary about humanity is always very astute and engaging. And I used this word unflinchingly before, and I use that word a lot, but it is, you know, it just puts it all out in front of you, and it does not seek explanation or judgments. It's just observation. It's just telling it how it was, and I really connected to that method of storytelling. I also connected to the brotherly relationship in this novel. I have a brother, so any book that deals with a close sibling set, I connect to very well. Overall, what the book is doing is it's balancing this childlike confusion with the knowledge of adulthood as Angelou is reflecting on her past, and she's giving her younger self and the reader insights that she didn't have before, and this puts a really important emphasis on hope and resilience. And if you want to read a really engaging memoir about hope and resilience, this is absolutely one for you. I think it should be taught everywhere. I think that this was really great, and it's hard to express enjoyment over something that was a really intense, harrowing read, but those are the books that I connect to the most. And it's not that long, it takes a weekend, and I would absolutely recommend this to anybody. On a similar note, I also read All About Love: New Visions by Bell Hooks. Bell Hooks very important writer, feminist, social critic, and she's best known for her writings on race, feminism, and class. And this is a collection of essays, about love in modern society. I was motivated to read Bell Hooks because she is like one of the major icons of second wave feminism, and that her writing is so heralded and recommended by people like me, I guess, and the people I look to for book recommendations. And I decided to give this one a try, and I felt that it wasn't quite for me, but it could be for somebody else, because I found a lot of the ideas to be a little obvious, maybe perhaps basic, but I feel like this book is better suited to somebody who is dealing with trying to figure out their dysfunctional childhood, and they're hesitating to call it dysfunctional because they were clothed and fed and housed, and they would feel guilty for asking more than that. And I think if that speaks to you, then this would be a book for you, of trying to understand and differentiate like care and love, or people who maybe struggle with romantic relationships or are struggling to find their place in a community. Not to brag, but I was really loved in childhood. Perfect childhood, there, I said it. And I married my first boyfriend and have only been treated with love. So that's kind of a brag, I suppose. And so a lot of this stuff I didn't feel very useful, because I didn't have to challenge my ideas of love, because the way that she's describing love and healthy love is the only way I've ever received it, really. Additionally, I feel like the ideas feeling basic is just a result of the successes of second wave feminism and activists like Bell Hooks, that of course we think certain things, and of course we think women should express themselves in a relationship so they have a high self-worth, and there's like an equal playing field of communication in a partnership. Of course we think these things, but like for a long time this was considered silly or taboo, a lady expressing herself. So it's like, yeah, they're basic, but they weren't always basic. It's like reading Agatha Christie, and it feels cliche, but even though Agatha Christie was the one who invented a lot of these cliches, and she midwifed the mystery genre into mainstream success, so it has that same feeling where like maybe if I was reading this 30 years ago or 20 years ago, I would find a lot more of this interesting and engaging. But even so, I did feel like these essays were a little preachy, and they lacked a narrative. There was like a lack of storytelling. It was just her explaining her ideas, citing studies, and making conclusions. And compared to a book I read recently called Braiding Sweetgrass, and she, and that author, Robin Kimmerer, when she was talking about her ideas about plants and humanity and naturalism, she would tell stories about her own mother, or mothering her kids, or dropping her kid off at college, or cleaning a pond, and things like this, to give her ideas this playground to grow. And that I find that the stories are a lot more engaging, and you can more easily harvest the ideas and remember the ideas when they're connected to engaging stories. However, when it's just kind of like essays about ideas, it's less sticky, and it did feel a little woo-woo, you know what I mean? She talked about the love ethic, like if only we could just love each other, then everything would be okay. And in modern times it just doesn't feel like possible, and so it was feeling a little, I don't know, a little hippy-dippy for me personally, even though I don't think this was published that long ago. I think this was published in 1999 or 2000, so that's how I feel about that. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the novels I read last month. I'm going to start with Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. This is a post-climate crisis dystopian novel that I think was written in 1993 but takes place around 2024 through 2027. So when I did open the book and saw that it was taking place in 2024, that was gripping, especially with how prophetic this book is, and the way she was predicting a lot of the things that are currently happening, like pig-headed president and climate crisis and water crisis, food insecurity, inflation. And this book is described as, because there's many different kinds of dystopian, and I think one is like, if this happens, then this will happen, kind of dystopian, and another is, if this continues to happen, then this will happen. And this is very much like, if we continue to live the way we do, this could happen. And so therefore she's making these really intentional parallels to our universe, to our, I mean, I guess it's our universe too, but like our reality, our history, American history. And the book is about this young girl. It follows her for several years, beginning around the age of 14 maybe. And she lives in this walled community with her family, her father, her stepmother, and some half-brothers, as well as like her general neighborhood. Her father works outside of the community and has to leave every day and come back. They're worried about people climbing over the wall and breaking in. There's a lot of violence outside. Sometimes they have to leave for resources or shooting practice and things like that. And so it feels like this, like they're really cut off from everything, but at the same time they're like an oasis in the chaos. Our main character, it takes place from her perspective through journal entries. Her name is Lauren, and she's really interesting to me because her biological mother was abusing drugs while she was pregnant with her, and as a result, Lauren was born with this condition called hyperempathy, where she can physically feel the pain of others if she's looking at them, like to the point of even her bleeding if she's seeing someone bleeding. And when she has to hurt somebody else to protect herself, she's in turn hurting herself. And that is like a really interesting aspect of the book. And in fact, I'm not sure I've ever related more to a protagonist in a novel. This, as soon as I read her, I felt so spiritually connected to this person. One, because I'm empathetic myself. Two, I have a chronic illness, and the way that Lauren has to navigate the world with this weakness and having to over and over again explain to people what's wrong with her and not wanting people to feel sorry for her, and also having to pick the correct time to tell people who can she trust with this information. I felt really connected to that, and it did feel sort of similar to my own experience. I also connected to her in terms of her being like a natural leader. She's flawed, but in a very realistic way. She's a survivor. Additionally, she is really invested in philosophy, and a main aspect of the book is her creating sort of her own religion and ideas and belief systems that can inspire hope. And again, this is another book about hope and resilience, and that hard-won hope that is found only within and through ideas that you gain over a period of time. This religion that she's creating, and actually she says she's not creating it in the book, she says that she's observing the world around her, and that's the religion. It's similar to like Isaac Newton didn't invent gravity, he just discovered it. And so this is a religion that she's discovering called Earthseed, and as you go through the book there are like major tenets that she's writing down. One of them is, all that you touch you change, all that you change changes you, the only lasting truth is change, God is change. Something else I really liked that she wrote, the universe is God's self-portrait. And I was really not only seeing myself in her character, but also seeing myself in these spiritual observations, because I'm sort of trying to figure out what I believe now, and this book almost feels like a sacred text at this point. I mean, I was writing so much of it down, and I'm finding it really difficult. As you can see, I'm struggling to find the words to express my admiration for the storytelling of the novel, and that it's so well written, and that I love the character, but it's more than the sum of its parts. Like, if you want to understand who I am, read Parable of the Sower. And it was a little reminiscent of all the dystopians that I read as a teen, but the power of this novel lies in the perspective of the main character, and that's what sets it apart from any other dystopian that you've read. I don't know, the hard-won hope that really means something. And the novel can be very bleak, but through the struggle and through the connections that the protagonist makes with other characters, it still feels like it means something, even though on first glance it feels like everything means nothing, because it's so chaotic, and that they fail over and over and over again, and that the book ends in a really ambiguous way where it kind of implies that maybe they're going to continue to try and fail forever. And I really connect to a message like that, especially now. So hopefully I've expressed myself decently about this book. I've been dreading trying to talk about it in this video because I sound like a maniac, and I know that when I'm editing this I'm gonna be like, shut up bitch, stop talking, like they get your point, or you're not making any sense. So I hope that I've expressed my love for this novel properly. It went right to my favorite books of all time, favorite books of the year, and there is a sequel called Parable of the Tenants, maybe, and I have a hold for that at the library, so I'll read that next year and I'll let you know how that is. Okay, so I just gushed a lot about a novel, and maybe now it's time to do some hating, some hateration. And here's the thing, I don't want to be a hater, but I just am. I don't want to be, but I am, because I just want to have a good time. And sometimes I seek books out where the intention is to just have a silly, goofy time, and I really can't commit myself to it, because as you can see from the three books that I've talked about so far, and I mean click on any video on this channel, I love a bleak, sad, dense book. And I feel like I should be sprinkling in some lighthearted, good fun every once in a while. I think that'd be good for my mental health. I think it's important to read broadly, and I do see people online who have my book taste of these like bleak, sad books, but at the same time they're also reading these like silly, goofy fantasies and romances and fantasy romances, and that they're also capable of having a really good time. So I was thinking, man, I want to have a good time too, so I decided to pick up something called Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. And let me just say, I did not have a good time. Everybody likes this, and I want to express that I wish that I liked it too. But unfortunately, it's kind of vapid. This book is about a paladin. If you don't know what a paladin is, it's like almost like a crusader, but not. They're big in like Dungeons and Dragons and other like RPG, tabletop, and video games. And this paladin is without purpose because his god is dead. And then it's also about a skilled perfumer. They sort of meet by chance, and then they like each other, and then blah 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 blah. Cozy fantasy and romantasy, that's romance and fantasy, portmanteaued, are like all the rage right now. And I don't mind a low stakes little thing where they're just they meet, there's a small problem, they're trying to solve the problem at the same time they kind of grow to like each other. And I like a fantasy setting. I'm learning. I've been pushing myself to read fantasy this year. I just couldn't connect to this for several reasons. One, I felt like this book was so clearly catering to a certain kind of reader, and it's above catering. It's like pandering. For example, the paladin in like one of the very first chapters is he's like doing like some bodyguard stuff on the side because his god is dead. What is he gonna do? And he's like waiting for somebody, so then he pulls something out of his bag to work on while he's waiting. And what is he working on? He's knitting. He's a paladin who knits. And not only is he a paladin who knits, but he's a paladin who knits socks for his friends, for his other paladins, whose god is also dead. And not only are they socks, but they're pink socks, because something went wrong with the dye, and now I am painting pink socks for all my little friends. That, for me, was really cringe, because let's see, like if it was Terry Pratchett doing it, I'd be like, oh, it's clearly for a gag, we're just gagging around. This was meant to be like something endearing about the character, and I just found it really cringe. And I'm like, no one could ever accuse me of not being woke enough. Wokest girl on the planet, thank you. I'm just not into a man who knits, sorry, but like it was just so on the nose because again, knitting is so in fashion right now, especially with the chronically online girlies who are on TikTok. And those chronically online girlies are also reading romantasy and they're knitting, so it just felt really pandering. I did harp on the knitting thing for a long time, but that really bothered me. I would like held my husband hostage in the kitchen to tell him about this knitting paladin for like 10 minutes while we were cooking dinner the other night. And overall, I just feel like this was made for millennial white women in their late 30s who have an active Facebook account and a bumper sticker for their pet. Thus, the language itself felt really millennial cringe. Not to hate on millennials, but like, y'all make it so easy. Like, a slight spoiler, but she gets arrested at some point, and from inside the jail cell, her inner monologue was, well, that's a thing that just happened. Oh my god, is it 2012 Tumblr? Well, that just happened. Ooh, that is so cringe. The characters themselves are unbearable to witness because each of them are convinced that the other doesn't like them. Which could be interesting in terms of angst, and when it was trying to be angst, it just came off as insecurity. Like, oh, he could never like me, even though it's written on page that she is like pretty with big boobs. Of course he's gonna like you, you idiot. And he's like, oh, she could never like me, even though on page it's muscle on top of muscle. So like, you're two conventionally attractive people who get along fine in a friendly sense, so why are you assuming that they won't like you? So it's just like these constant inner monologues of like insecurity and doubt. It really contributes to this slow pacing, and honestly, these characters are supposed to be in their 30s, and it's like prepubescent behaviors. Like, this is the inner monologue of a 12-year-old in homeroom. Like, does Johnny like me? I'm gonna put a note in his locker. The girl is this like mousy, measly, she's constantly in need of rescue. She has no social ability. She can't manage a social situation whatsoever. And she's canonically bad in bed. And so she needs to be like, because the thing about these books is that they have like sexual elements to them. And I'm filled with like, I don't know, 2,000 years of Catholic shame, so I can't really enjoy them, but even still, a character being canonically bad in bed just puts me off. And then the paladin is just also boring and insecure. And because this book is a series, I was confident enough to start a series. I'll never do that again. Well, I didn't even find out why his god died, which is kind of my whole reason for continuing to read, because I was interested in that idea. And the thing about this author is from time to time she would write a good sentence or a good sequence, passage, and therefore I think that she's capable of good writing. So then the bad writing felt like a choice, and it was very teenage Tumblr. So I'm like, are you pandering to these people, or do you actually write like this? And I pushed through because I wanted to give it a chance, because I feel like that there could be something in this cozy genre that I could like, but this just was not it. The lack of world building, the lack of an interesting romance, the lack of good writing. Like, I just don't know who this is for, and like, who is enjoying this. It's a book that made me feel crazy, because then I would go read 5-star reviews online, and I would want to throw myself out of a window. Like, what are you people talking about? It doesn't make any fucking sense to me. And that's all that I have to say. I ranted for about 10 minutes on that. And we'll see what I keep in the edit. Oh my god. Now we're gonna swing back around. Let's end on a good note. So then I'll just cover quickly a book that I just thought was okay, and that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is a little vampire novel I read because 'twas the season, and it's like a spin on Dracula's wives told from the perspective of Constanta. Is that a real character in Dracula? It's been so long since I've read that. Let me Google it. Okay, so it's an original character, and the whole thing did feel like Dracula fanfiction. Not to bring up Tumblr again, but it did feel a little fanfiction-y, just kind of doing what looks cool, what sounds cool. There was like an attempt to make a commentary on predatory love and abuse and things like that. It just all was really predictable to me. It all played out like I thought it would. Like, quickly think of a sensual vampire novel that is a spin on the Brides of Dracula. What you're thinking of is exactly what it is. So it's like a little obvious, a little mundane, a little slow. I found the writing to be kind of overwritten, like very lady on a chaise lounge like this, monologuing about about nothing, I guess. Just like really melodramatic. So if you want like an easy read for next Halloween season, go ahead and read A Dowry of Blood. To end on a good note, I want to talk about Deep Cuts by Holly Brickley. This was so good. Obsessed with this. This is set in the 2000s, following some music-obsessed students turned adults, and it's about their relationship, it's about artistic connections, it's about growing up. There's a line in the book that I really like that I'll paraphrase that kind of explains what the book is about, and that is in how many ways and how many times can the same two people break each other's hearts. And it's also a testament to the early to mid 2000s with the introduction of online resources like social media and forums, and the rise of indie rock and things like this, the effect of 9/11 on millennials. And I really enjoyed this kind of like obscure history because no one's writing about the 2000s. Everybody wants to write about the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, but nobody's really writing about this decade. So if you have fond memories of the 2000s, or if you don't have fond memories of the 2000s and you want to like comb through it, I think this is a good book to pick up as like a resource to understand kind of what people were going through in the moment, while at the same time remaining having a really kind of light atmosphere. It doesn't go too deeply intense. And I loved the voice of this book. It's in first person, and she's got this really great conversational tone, yet at the same time it's really like an engaging narrative as well. It's a bit like High Fidelity by Nick Hornby, but like less like bro-y. And then it's also a bit like Boy Parts by Eliza Clark, but without like all that depraved goriness. I often read from the perspective of young women a lot, as I think most people do. Like a young female perspective does feel like what 80% of books are. But if you've ever been a young woman, then you know how rare it is to really connect to their narrative voice and how they talk and how they think. It doesn't always feel accurate or authentic. However, this young woman's voice was scarily accurate. As a former lonely and frustrated college student, I really saw myself in the page, and she was thinking in the ways that like sort of an insecure 20-year-old would think, and then an insecure 25-year-old later. And so it does feel like a really fleshed out, tangible character, which I really admire. Same with everybody in the book, really. The young man that she's interacting with over that period of 8 years, and the will they won't they of it all. Sometimes it's hard to pull off a will they won't they because you want them together and then you don't want them together and then you want them together again, and that's dynamic is really difficult to pull off, but she absolutely pulls it off. I mean, I was constantly reading this book. You can ask my husband, every time he turned around it was me on my Kindle reading Deep Cuts. And so as you can see, the flawed aspects of their character are what really lead the novel and pull the novel. So if you're really interested in good characterization and character-driven plots, then this is absolutely for you. And if you like characters doing the wrong thing, but you don't hate them for it because you're just young and you're fumbling around in the dark and you don't really know what you're doing, then this book also executes that idea very well. And I loved the writing in this. It made me like a little jealous, to be honest, because the main character wants to be a music journalist, so she's able to, the author I mean, is able to put in these pieces of music criticism and these little music essays and developed the writing style of the character within the book, so that as you're reading the character get better at writing, and that's really impressive. Like it's like when a good singer, like an actor who can sing really well, is playing a character who can't sing really well, and they're really pulling off that like inability to sing in a way that you is really impressive, because it's kind of hard to sing badly if you know how to sing, and it's kind of hard to write poorly or change the way you write or make your writing really malleable so that it fits the character. It's really difficult to do that, and she pulled it off you know, really well. And my I have my notes down here, that's why I'm looking down. And my last note for this is I feel like Fred Armisen would really like this. So if you have similar tastes to Fred Armisen, or if you like Fred Armisen, then you know what I mean. And because if someone told me this is a book Fred Armisen would probably like, I would buy it instantly. So if you know what I mean, if you also are cool with Fred like that, Fred, like he's my best friend, then pick up the book, damn it. So that's my November. That's what I read in November. Highs, lows, mediums. We packed it all in. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I was yelling at you the whole time about books to read, so hopefully you pick one up. Give it a like, give it a comment, subscribe or whatever, and I've got 2 more of these to do this year. So quickly, tell me what I should be reading before the end of the year. Anyway, okay, bye. Okay, bye.